Imagine, in the face of death, what kind of human being do I want to be? What's my masterpiece? What do I want to have achieved within myself? What kind of virtues do I want to have? What do I want to have done for the world? That's our ideal. And the path, the good path, let's say, is the one that gets there with the least detour possible. In other words, the straight path, the path that goes directly in that direction. In Eastern tradition, both Indian and Buddhist, this is called the right path or the middle path. Hello. Today we're here for a pretty special chat. Let's talk a bit about what a good path for a human being would be. Of course, when we talk about a good path, it already sounds like something conservative, old-fashioned, like those parents from back in the day who would say they want their kid to follow the good path. In other words, it creates a certain prejudice. But let's clarify, from a philosophical point of view, the good path is the path of goodness, the one that leads us to a higher and higher state of consciousness, a state of ever-increasing values, virtues, and wisdom. In other words, what makes us more human. The good path is the one that brings us closer and closer to the idea of goodness. In other words, it makes us grow a step, makes us better human beings. All of us, in one way or another, are looking to grow. And we know that we came into the world for this. We're not in this world on vacation. We're not just here to enjoy ourselves. We're here to leave a little bigger than we were when we came in. To make a difference for ourselves, for the world, for the people around us. In such a way that when we leave here, we've left the world a little better than it was when we arrived. And we also leave a little bigger than we were when we got here. Well, that being said, we can understand that there's an easier path, a right path, one that avoids all the detours and takes us directly to this ideal we're seeking, to maximize the possibilities of our life to become a better human being. Like I've said in many talks, imagine facing death and thinking about what kind of human being I want to be, what's my masterpiece, what I want to have achieved within myself, what kind of virtues I want to have, what I want to have done for the world. That's our ideal. And the path, the good path, let's say, is the one that gets there with the least detour possible. In other words, the right path, the path that goes directly in that direction. In Eastern tradition, both Indian and Buddhist, this is called the right path or the middle path. And we're going to talk a bit about this tradition, which tells us that this path is made up of 8 phases or 8 requirements, which is the Buddhist tradition. Our aim here isn't to dive into the details of the Buddhist tradition. That's not the point of this talk, but to chat a bit about these 8 items, these 8 recommendations that Buddhism gives us, so we can see if we're on the shorter right path, if we're following the Dharma. Because the Dharma is exactly that. Once I read an Eastern poem that said the Dharma is God's arm stretched over the cosmos. It's the most direct path to return to unity. It's the most direct path to reach the highest perfection we can achieve as human beings. So, being aligned with the Dharma would be the right path, the middle path, the one that offers us the least resistance, meaning greater fulfillment and greater happiness. Shall we understand how this is seen from the perspective of Buddhism? Well, it's said that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, when he became enlightened, or in other words, when he reached wisdom, in his first sermon, he talked about the 4 noble truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path to overcome suffering. The issue of suffering and pain is a central topic in Buddhist doctrine. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, spent his whole life searching for a way, he was committed to it, to find a way for man to overcome pain, to overcome suffering. That he wouldn't be constantly tormented by the great pains of life, like old age, illness, and death. That he could go through all these things without being hit so hard. In other words, a path to overcoming pain. And when he becomes enlightened in his first sermon, he talks about this path he discovered. He's going to talk about the 4 noble truths. Very briefly, like I mentioned to you, the goal of this talk isn't to dive into Buddhist doctrine, but very briefly, the first noble truth is the one that talks about pain. That pain exists. And pain is directly linked to impermanence. The things of the manifested world, they're all impermanent. Everything you can imagine around you, or even this vehicle we're using, all of it is temporary. At a certain point, we won't have these things anymore. Therefore, pain is linked to impermanence. It's part of the manifested universe and is tied to the fact that things are temporary. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth talks about the origin of pain. What makes us suffer? Well, pain is linked to impermanence. But why do we suffer? Because we cling to what's impermanent. If we were to make a list of the 10 things we love most in life, you'll see that probably 10 or at least 9 of them are impermanent. We hardly ever put justice, kindness, fraternity, the essence of another being, more than their physical incarnation, on that list. In other words, we seek physical things, manifested things, temporary things. We're really attached to these things. When we cling to something that we're inevitably going to lose at some point, of course, we end up living in anticipation of that loss, already afraid of losing it. When you get something, let me tell you, it's only for a short time. From the very first moment you enjoy that thing, the fear of losing it comes along with the enjoyment. That life becomes that waiting game, that countdown, to lose what I'm so attached to. In other words, life becomes a valley of suffering because it's one loss after another, since these things can't be held on to. It's part of the law of life that all things in the manifested world are temporary. So, about the origin of pain, it comes from our attachment to temporary things, to things we're inevitably going to lose. The third noble truth talks about overcoming pain. It says there's a possibility to overcome pain, which is exactly about shifting our affections, our attachments, from things that are temporary to things that are permanent. In other words, towards values, virtues, our essence as human beings, the essence of all things, towards this metaphysical, spiritual plane where nothing fades away, where everything is permanent. From the moment we find this dimension of the essence of things, of our own essence, we find this world where values, virtues, and wisdom reign. When we bring our affections into this world, in other words, when we love things in this world, we don't lose anything anymore. We rise above these transient things of the material world. They come and go and we don't suffer from it anymore, because we know that's their fate, to come and go. And we're attached to things that don't go away, that are permanent, meaning they give you a solid ground to stand on. So, that would be the possibility of overcoming pain, which is the third noble truth. The fourth noble truth, folks, talks about the path to overcoming pain. In other words, you're here in the manifested world, where everything is temporary. How do I let go of these things and hold on to things that are permanent? How do I get out of this crossroads of suffering? What's the step-by-step I need to follow in my daily life to overcome pain? The path to the cessation of suffering. And this path consists of 8 steps they provide, which is called the Noble Eightfold Path. In other words, 8 steps to liberate from pain. So, you might have even seen a wheel, which is associated with Buddhism, known as the Wheel of Dharma. This Wheel of Dharma has 8 spokes, which are exactly associated with the Noble Eightfold Path, the 8 steps to overcoming suffering. So it's one of the crucial and fundamental elements within Buddhist doctrine, the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And now we're going to take a look at what this Noble Eightfold Path is, and how we can understand it in its original dimension, because doing it completely, fully, is something that's currently out of our reach, but understanding what we can do for it, in other words, that complete step is far from me. But moving in that direction, climbing a step or 2, I can do that. What can I do better, right now, with the life we have, with our limitations, to move towards overcoming this noble eightfold path. This path indeed teaches us to escape from this heap of sufferings and pains that life becomes when you're too attached to it. The fear of our own death and of the things around us. The fear of loss, the constant pain it causes us. The Four Noble Truths, then, talk about what righteousness is. And the Noble Eightfold Path really focuses on that. There are going to be 8 types of right behavior. Right thought, right concentration. We need to understand what this idea of righteousness is. The idea of righteousness is to try to make sure that my action, right now, no matter how small, is aligned with my dharma, is aligned with my ideal that's out there in the future, that human being you dreamed of becoming, what you want to be. In other words, I want to be a just, good man. I want to be a balanced, brotherly man. All right, that's my ideal. That's my goal. Right action is the action that brings me closer to that, right now. A man who's going to become like that, what does he do right now? What's the step right in front of me? So, righteousness is about finding the shortest path, the straight path, the path of balance and harmony, the middle path, which will lead you towards that ideal, which is always based on moderation and harmony. That's the idea that keeps us on the middle path. Moderation regarding excesses and harmony, both internal and external. When we harmonize with ourselves, we harmonize with the world. So let's get into the Noble Eightfold Path, that complicated name that actually means the path with 8 steps, the path with 8 phases. The first phase, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path is right understanding. What does right understanding mean? To understand the world in the most real way you can see, as things really are, meaning breaking the veils of illusion. What causes us to have illusions when trying to understand things? In general, our desires. When we really want something to be a certain way, we look at things and don't see them for what they are. See our desires. It's the projection of what we are, of what we want. Sometimes we twist the facts to make them look like what we wanted to see. In other words, I think so-and-so isn't a good person, so many times we look at someone's actions and twist them to fit into our mental pattern. I don't see reality, I see my projection in things. Like Caetano Veloso says in that song, Narcissus finds ugly what is in a mirror. In other words, everything becomes a mirror of myself. If I don't like something, I'm going to see it in a negative light. If I like something, I'm going to see it in a positive light. And I never worry about knowing, without liking or disliking, without any inclination, what things are in themselves. Sometimes I don't even believe that things exist in themselves. It seems like the world is just a game of opinions, of likes and dislikes, and the distortions they cause. I don't believe that. I believe the world would still exist even if humanity didn't. There's a truth in the world itself, whether we like it or not. If there were no humanity, things would still be there and continue on their path. In other words, there's a truth to things, and right understanding seeks this truth. It seeks to break through the veils of illusion. It seeks to see things as closely as possible. A practice I recommend for you all, which is self-questioning about our conduct, is a fundamental element that we can do right now. How do I recommend you do that? Practice right understanding about yourself, because that's where everything starts. Right understanding first comes from understanding ourselves, then projecting that understanding onto the world, which has been sharpened and refined by using it on ourselves. So, the quest for self-questioning, the quest to understand yourself, I recommend you do a simple little exercise that will help you move towards this right understanding. Every day, before going to sleep, reflect on how your day went. Compare it with your ideal, the human being you want to be, when all this is over. Compare your day. Was this a day that leads in that direction? All the actions I took today, do they bring me closer to who I want to be or not? or do some push me away or leave me stuck. I'm going to question those actions I took that aren't in line with the person I want to become in my life. I'm going to question what led me to take them. What was the factor that pushed me in that direction? And I'm going to try to prepare myself so that next time I encounter that factor, it doesn't corrupt me again. That's corruption, letting ourselves be corrupted in our values by circumstances. When I encounter such a factor, it won't corrupt me anymore. It won't take me off my path. If every day we look at our day and analyze what we did that was in line with our ideal and what we did that wasn't, we start getting stronger because we begin to understand who we really are. Remember that phrase, by their deeds you will know them. It's not by your titles, nor by your opinion, but by your deeds. By looking at our deeds, we get to know more and more who we are. I'm someone who hasn't mastered this thing yet, so I'm going to keep an eye on it to overcome it at some point. When you do this every day, take a few minutes at night, if possible even write it down, keep a journal, because then it's recorded and it's easier to do. If it's just in your thoughts can be kind of slippery, right? Journal your days. So, when you're about to do something that goes against your principles, your conscience will call you out right then and there. And you're going to have to own up to it at night, in front of your conscience, in front of your journal. During the day, this will help you get back on track from your detours. Oops, I won't be able to justify that. I can't own up to something like that in front of my conscience. It's way off. So, during the day, when you're doing things, you'll start correcting yourself. You'll start correcting yourself to avoid having that unpleasant confrontation at night. And keep recording it, keep bringing awareness. Because when we're not aware of our mistakes, we have no way to fix them. We have to evaluate ourselves by the trail we leave in the world. The trail I left today. Was it the trail of a human being? Or at some moments did I leave a bit of a wild trail, leaving destruction in my wake? How did I go through my day today? What was consistent with my ideal of being human, and what was inconsistent? This is a self-questioning that keeps giving us more and more tools for correction. And so you can see yourself and know why you're struggling, what you're giving into, what your weak points are, and what things you need to strengthen. And get ready to work on those points. In other words, Pythagoras, who was a great master of philosophy, at his school in Crotona, in his Pythagorean museum, he already asked his disciples to keep a journal. This isn't something I made up. I mean, it was something he considered highly beneficial, so we can take control of our days, know what we're up to, and understand ourselves in a more honest way, without fantasies, and be able to correct ourselves more effectively. In other words, right understanding is about overcoming illusions, doing some self-reflection that allows us to have a more honest view of ourselves, and consequently, a more honest view of life. The second step is right thinking. What will right thinking tell us? Right thinking is the kind of thinking that involves letting go. That kind of thinking where we let go of anything that might cause harm. In other words, I don't want my thoughts to hurt anyone. I want my thoughts to be free from the three poisons they call greed, anger, and ignorance. I don't want my thoughts to be tainted by anything negative. I understand that all my behavior starts with my thoughts. So, I have to take care of my thoughts. From my thoughts, greed, anger, and ignorance are born. So, I start to realize the importance of being aware and controlling my thoughts. Not having those thoughts that constantly hurt myself. And that, consequently, will hurt someone. A tendency towards very harsh criticism. A tendency to see the negative side of things. A tendency to be inattentive to the things in life. A tendency to see the worst in everything. In other words, pay attention to your thoughts. Work on controlling it because it's on the mental plane that everything starts. In the Kybalion, that's the first principle, mentalism. Inner life starts with controlling the mind. We have to start working on a reasonable control of our thoughts. One of the things I recommend for you to do this so you can even be aware of what you've been thinking. Because if I ask you, were you harshly critical in your thoughts today? Thoughts are so light and pass by so quickly that you might not even be able to tell me. We don't even know what we've been thinking about. I always do an exercise with my students that I recommend to you. A mental pattern you want to overcome, for example, of criticism, negative criticism, criticism that affects, criticism that destroys. I'm going to carry a piece of paper with me today. Every time I have a critical thought like that, I'm going to make a mark. A little line. Then I make another mark, draw a little square and cross it diagonally. Again, I start. All day long, every time I have a critical thought, I do this on that little piece of paper. By the end of the day, you'll be amazed at how many little marks there are on that piece of paper. You'll realize that you're truly addicted to criticizing. You do it every minute, and you're not even aware of it. It's a habit, and if you notice it, you can change it. My students would come up to me and say, "Teacher, it's incredible, because when I was watching myself to not criticize, I ended up with nothing to think about, because I realized my mental space was almost entirely filled with criticism all the time. I had to turn outward, pay attention to things, to fill my mind, because my mind was occupied by criticism almost all the time. I had to stop the car to make a mark on that little piece of paper." It's really like that. I take a mental pattern of, I don't know, greed, anger, and I start marking on the little piece of paper every time I have that negative mental pattern. You'll notice that it stays with you all day long. And once you know, once you're aware, you can start to consciously fight it. Notice how these negative mental patterns stick with us way more often than we'd like. And from the moment we know, we can start creating techniques to avoid it. When a mental pattern comes in, no, I don't want to think about that, and put something healthy in its place. Something you like, something simple, I don't know, a sport, anything. Take out that negative mental pattern and put something healthy in its place, in such a way that you can always be correcting the course of your mind until you free yourself from that habit, which is just like any other habit. We have a lot of mental habits, a lot of habits in our thoughts. So, notice them and work against them. Always try to remove, throw away, and fill your mind with something else that's positive and healthy. It's a struggle. At a certain point, you'll notice it doesn't come as often anymore, and then eventually, it just doesn't come at all. And that's how we won a big battle. That's why we came into the world, to win this battle against all these things that pollute us, that strip us of our character, that stop us from being true human beings. So, that's a tip about right thinking. It's the second step, the second part of the Noble Eightfold Path. The third step, the third recommendation, is right speech. In other words, we should try to refrain from lying, falsehoods, slander, harsh words, and aim to have constructive, harmonious, and conciliatory speech. Buddhism says something really interesting, and I believe in it. They say that a big part, if not most, of our negative karma comes from twisted words. In other words, if you consider all the mistakes you've made in life, most of them were poorly expressed words, words said the wrong way, words that were out of line, words of slander, lies, offense, and malicious criticism. In other words, most of our life's mistakes, our negative karma, mostly came from bad words. And that's something fundamental for us to have too. Another thing for us to be aware of, to learn to speak more calmly and pay attention to what you're saying. Have a way to analyze things so you can put the brakes on when something comes up that's not really in line with who you want to be. Regarding this issue of right speech, I suggest a practical exercise. First, take care of your vocabulary. Rude vocabulary is offensive, it's aggressive. It's like you're breaking the flow of your speech, bringing it down to a level of vulgarity. So, Be very careful with foul language, aggressive words. This kind of language completely throws off our behavior. It breaks the beauty. No one could imagine, for example, a beautiful poem with a curse word in the middle. That totally breaks the beauty. It throws everything off balance. So, take care of your vocabulary. Not that it has to be scholarly, but it should be clean, clear, and good. Make sure to clean up your vocabulary. And another thing that's just as important is for us to see the reaction our words provoke in others. Sometimes someone comes and tells a person a message. Then someone else comes and tells that same person the exact same message, and they get irritated and offended. They didn't get upset when the first person spoke. What's going on there? Why did I, saying the same message, hurt people? See the effect your words have on people. Am I hurting, offending, humiliating? In some way, I'm polluting the mind of that person who was doing just fine. I threw in some gossip, some intrigue. What have I been doing to people with my words? Be mindful of your tone and facial expression. Sometimes someone thinks you're upset with them just because you kept a hint of sadness on your face. You got upset about something and didn't know how to remove that look from your face. And you walked around with that mask all day, everyone thinking you were upset with them. Watch your facial expression. Watch your tone. Tone, then, gives a completely different touch to a message. Try to make your speech. That's in everyday life. Pay attention to how you communicate, especially with those who are closest to you. Because that's where we let our guard down. You speak any old way and give up on speaking respectfully, simple but respectful, using polite words, not fancy ones. You don't need that, unless it's a special case where you want to use them, but usually a simple, positive vocabulary with the right tone and the right facial expression, so that when you look at people, you can see that your words are caressing, not hurting. Even if you have to give some correction. Saying something that points out a flaw in that person, trying to educate them, even if the message is a bit harsh. But the way you speak feels like a caress. And that person, even receiving that order, that recommendation, doesn't feel attacked. She feels that you cared about her and want her to get better. It's interesting how people can do that. Make certain warnings, certain complaints, sound as gentle as a caress. By the way, the person knew how to say those words. So, take care of your words, the way you communicate. It's one of the fundamental things for us to reduce our deviation from Dharma. That's where we make a lot of mistakes. We're really careless with our words. Words have tremendous value. There was a time when people believed, like in India itself, that words have a magical value. In India, Egypt, and other civilizations. So, take care of them. Treat them with care. Don't just dump them on people any old way. Remember, most of humanity's mistakes are made in this area. What else do we have? Then we have right conduct. So, what exactly is right conduct? It's about not having improper conduct that could, in some way, lead me away from Dharma. In other words, that conduct that goes against my values, that goes against my principles. In other words, taking care of my actions, what I'm doing with my life. Sometimes I have extremely selfish behavior and I don't even realize it. In the little things, folks, pay attention to the little things. Because the big things come from the accumulation of the small ones. In an army that's at war, it doesn't fight well just because it showed up at that moment and went to war out of nowhere. It fights well because it's been training every day. If we want to have the right attitude, we have to keep training every day. So, think about the little things we do. Like that little plant at home that you don't care about its suffering. You leave it there drying up because you're too lazy to get up and go water it. It's cruel, there's life there. That person who suddenly needed a smile. You're in a bad mood, Today I'm not going to smile at anyone. Or that moment when you greet someone and the person, with a look, tells you they need something more. They need a hug and you ignore it because you don't have time for that. How many little cruelties, selfish acts do we commit throughout the day? Taking care of our actions, taking care of our conduct so they don't lead us away from the Dharma, taking care of our conduct so that it reflects our right thinking. If you have right thinking, it makes it a lot easier for your conduct to be consistent because conduct is born in the realm of thought. One thing I offer as a little piece of advice for practicing this step of the Noble Eightfold Path is to take care of your decisions, because all your actions are preceded by a decision. From the small things to the big ones, we make a decision first and then we act. Make your decisions with more attention, with more calm. We have a tendency to go after what brings us the most advantages, which can sometimes be incredibly selfish. Don't look for what brings you the most advantages. Look for the option that benefits the most people possible in every situation. So, what am I going to do here? No, I'm not going to do that. Why? This could even be profitable for me, but so and so, this person, and that person would be affected. Well, I'm not going to think that way here, because if I get distracted and generate this kind of thought, soon it'll influence other people who see me distracted, and they'll get distracted too. In other words, every little thing you think, feel, say, or do, be careful so that your decisions aren't selfish. Be careful that your decisions are based on benefiting a larger group of people, not just yourself. If we take care of our decisions, our actions will be less distorted. There will be less cruelty, less violence, and much less deviation from the Dharma if you take care at the moment of decision. Always trying to expand your sphere of concern. More people, not just your own skin, not just your benefit, more people, a larger group of human beings. Because the ideal is that one day we think about all of humanity. That's what we're working towards. One day, down the road, when we're much wiser, we'll consider all of humanity before making any decision. At this moment, the best I can do. Moving forward, the right way of living. He's going to say that the right way of living is a balanced lifestyle, not leaning towards being wasteful, nor being stingy, not the kind of life where you just hoard a whole bunch of resources, nor the one where you waste everything. Rather being more balanced, meeting the law of life's necessity and not violating any of your principles, any of your values. In other words, according to this, you couldn't have a job or do something that directly harms people. You'd have to question if what you're doing to make a living isn't something that stops someone else from having a healthy way of living too, from getting their healthy survival. So have this criterion to analyze. Sensibly evaluate if our way of living doesn't directly harm someone. The way I do such a thing, the way I make a sale, do I lie to people? The way I treat someone, am I really that kind person? Or am I just wearing a mask until the deal is closed? In other words, the way I earn my living and also the kind of work I do. Now, with more clarity, let's be careful, because if we start with an unclear criterion, we'll end up asking more than half of humanity to quit their jobs. We have to understand that something that harms someone, an unworthy way of living, is something that somehow directly hurts another person. I mean, if you're a drug dealer, there's nothing to question. If you're a producer of pornography, there's nothing to question. Now, if, for example, you work in a beverage factory, that drink wasn't made to get people drunk. People can drink socially. A lot of people like to drink. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with someone having a glass of wine or a beer at a dinner or a social gathering. That's not a cardinal sin. The drink wasn't created to cause drunkenness, the sickness of being drunk. It was made to promote healthy social consumption. And so, the excess isn't its fault. It's like saying you can't work in a chocolate factory because there are chocoholics. But chocolate wasn't made for chocoholics. It was made for those who have a normal consumption, who like, appreciate, and consume it in moderation. So, you can't say you work in a chocolate factory because there are people addicted to chocolate. Isn't that a direct relationship? This object wasn't made to harm people. Now, when things are used poorly, all of them can be harmful. But avoid ways of living that directly affect others negatively. Directly take away someone else's dignity and quality of life. Because it's not fair that your benefit causes harm to someone else. That's one of the most immoral things in the history of humanity. That what benefits me brings harm to others. That my pleasure depends on someone else's pain. We can't accept this kind of lifestyle. That's what this step says about the right way of living. Moving on, right effort. Right effort is that positive attitude we always have to change for the better. Take advantage of every opportunity we have to grow. Whoa, such a thing is unknown. But who knows, maybe this unknown point gives us the chance to know ourselves and the world better. That desire we have to become a better human being than we were in the past. That reference we have of a wise, noble, good human being in wanting to get there. This right effort is what keeps us from freezing on our evolutionary path. In other words, we should strive to cultivate this righteousness in our efforts. What's the practical advice I give regarding this step? Watch out for laziness. This is a practical thing we can do. Pay attention when your decisions are being based on laziness. And when you spot that, act immediately. How many times did you have to go out and take a certain object somewhere? Then you think, I can't forget to grab that object. The moment you think that, you should immediately get up, grab the object, and put it in your bag. I'll do it in a bit. Where did that "I'll do it in a bit" voice come from? Laziness, inertia, the path of least resistance. And then you forget it 1,000 times. How many times do you say, this thing needs to be cleaned, I have to clean this? Then get up, go there, and clean it. I'll clean it one of these days. That stays dirty for years. How many things get left behind? How many things are lost? How many things don't get done because when you think about it, the excuse of the path of least resistance comes up? We have to, when we notice the need, realize that this voice is laziness, it's inertia, it's the path of least resistance, and react immediately, not allowing inertia and laziness to make decisions in our lives. She can't do that. If we let it, it steals our life. We're here to move forward, not to stay frozen. And inertia and laziness freeze us. We can't allow it. Like I said in another talk, you have to imagine it like a bug that just landed on you. You see it and immediately toss it away. No one is going to just watch and let a bug crawl on their skin. As soon as you see it, react. Because that way you'll always be channeling a right effort. You'll always be proactive. You'll always be looking for the next step for your growth. So, practical, simple things that we can do. Right attention. Right attention is about developing awareness of the body, speech, and mind, meaning being attentive to the things that are here now, what I'm saying, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm projecting onto you. Practically speaking, what would be a good practice of right attention? Like Carl Jung used to say, mind and body are linked together. Live the present moment with all its intensity, in such a way that you realize this moment is the only one you have. The past is gone, the future is ahead, you only have this moment. It's in this moment that you have to be fulfilled, be happy, or you never will be. Look for the details of the things around you, look out the window, everything that's out there, look at the environment you're in, pay attention to the noises, sharpen your senses, pay attention to everything happening around you, this full attention to the present moment. This is fundamental. This will allow us to be more and more complete at each step of the ladder. In other words, if I want to reach a world where I'm more complete than I am today, At each step, I have to be more and more complete, whole, in the present moment. Be careful with the theft of our attention. Right attention teaches us to maintain awareness of how things really are. That's just how it is. Attention will help us have the right understanding. Everything is interconnected. In other words, be present in your life. I advise you to always try to be aware of everything happening around you whenever you remember. Stop for a minute, listen to all the noises, look at all the details, feel the surface you're touching. In other words, feel the environment you're in. Get into a deep connection with life. This will start teaching you more and more about how life is, how incidents happen. This will bring you more and more wisdom. Know that the big evil of our time, among many others, of course, is dispersion. Attention is extremely necessary for us to enjoy life and receive what it wants to give us. What else? Right concentration. Right concentration involves mental stability and focus, the ability to focus on something and stay there, dive deep into it. I remember a part from the Mahabharata, which is broader than the Bhagavad Gita, where the legendary princes in this great classic, this renowned Indian epic, were trained in archery by a certain instructor named Drona, who was very skilled in archery. And they were trying to hit a target that was a wooden bird perched on a tree. And the instructor asked them to shoot an arrow that would pierce the eye of the wooden bird. And then the students came, the princes came, prepared their bows, and the instructor would ask, "What do you see?" "Ah, I see the blue sky, the leaves moving, everything around, the birds and the wooden bird in the tree." He would say, "Stop, don't shoot." And everyone came and gave the same answer, and he would say, "Stop, don't shoot." Then comes Arjuna, who is the wisest prince in the story, the main character, one of the Pandavas. He draws his bow, and then Drona asks him, "What do you see?" "The eye. The bird's eye. What else?" "Nothing else, just the bird's eye." "Now you can shoot." And he shoots, and his focus is spot on. He hits his target. There have to be certain moments when we have the power to focus our attention on something. You realize how hard this is when we try, for example, to read something. When we try to focus on a problem we need to solve, the tendency to get distracted is really strong. We've already talked about this back when we discussed attention, and here we are talking about it again. So, I recommend to you, as a practical guide, to get closer to this straight concentration, to do concentration exercises. Because it's a practice, it's almost like a mental workout to be able to keep your focus all in the same direction. It's like a laser beam, right? It focuses all the light on a single point. And that has a lot of power. How hard is it today for someone to dedicate themselves to a longer read when they're getting distracted 3-4 times on each page? The ability to concentrate can be trained. I recommend an exercise to you all, which you might have heard of, called Tritaka. It's really simple, a circle on a piece of paper with a dot in the center. This circle with the dot in the center, you have to keep looking at that, trying to concentrate, trying not to think about anything else. The idea is that the ideal concentration happens when you stop seeing the circle and only see the dot. It's interesting because it's something that requires a lot of effort, a lot of patience, because at first, nothing disappears. Then you start seeing the dot doubled, all that confusion. After a while, after insisting a lot, you start to see the circle appears and fades away, again and again, or parts of it disappear. If you insist a little more, even if it's just for a few seconds, you don't see anything of the circle, you only see the dot. You might say, "What big deal did I get out of this?" You did gain something. Go read a book and see what level of concentration you can manage now. It's like the muscles of attention. You practiced like someone working out a muscle at the gym. Like someone working out a muscle at the gym. When you need to use it, you'll see the advantages it brings. Ah, but I can't walk around with a piece of paper with a circle and a dot all day. Do it with any spot on the wall. I'm not going to see anything else. None of the corners of the wall, I'm not going to see anything. I'm just going to see that spot. Practice when you're in line, waiting anywhere. Practice a little Tritaka. It's a really simple exercise, but it truly helps you develop that muscle. To be fully present, focused on that object you want to pay attention to at that moment. To see it in depth, to see it clearly. So, my recommendation is take Tritaka or another exercise you know and practice concentration. This will really help a lot with our understanding of things. It allows us to see in depth. Well, and basically that's the Noble Eightfold Path. 8 recommendations, very small ones. You might say, well, is that it? It's not just that, it's all of that. Because it's basically talking about all your expressions. Your thoughts, your words, your actions, your concentration, your attention, your way of life. In other words, everything you're doing. All your actions in the world should seek the Dharma. Seek the Dharma in everything you do. In other words, in every action, look for your best. Try to be whole, present, giving your best at every step of life. And this gradually corrects, removes the bad habits, smooths out the rough edges, polishes the edges, bringing us closer and closer to this path, which is the path of least resistance for fulfillment, for happiness, for harmony with our inner and outer nature. In other words, for human life itself. This tradition gives us this set of advice in a very generous way. And it shows us how we can make a life plan to gradually reach that climbing up little by little. It's nothing extraordinary, nothing out of this world, but it requires discipline, perseverance, and consistency. Without hurry and without pause, moving in that direction. To assimilate each of these behaviors through small practices like the ones I shared with you. Well, to achieve this, I'm going to try a slightly more advanced practice, aligning more and more with my path. Until one day, I truly believe that all of us humans will be able to reach this middle path, this right path, that leads us to overcome all pain, all suffering, and makes us capable of guiding humanity in that direction too. I hope you can reflect a bit on this, see how these are doable things, and maybe get inspired to try them, maybe to do them, realizing that it's something within our reach and believing in the benefits it can bring us. A big hug for you.